Okay, so here's a short video to help you, see some examples of environmental responses and also refresh your memory on animal behavior. I'm sorry there's no video. I'm actually recording this in my car during my kids' soccer practice. All right, so examples of how organisms respond to their environment. Now, when we looked at phenotype, for example, we always talk about phenotype as being genetic and having an inherited component, talking about genes and alleles. What we're going to talk about in this video is environmental impact on phenotype, but also other ways that organisms respond to their environment through communication, behavior, pheromones, phototropism, gene expression, circadian rhythms, migration, reproduction, etc. You can always pause this slide and read it if you'd like. So when we talk about environmental impact on phenotype, you can see here that the average heights of men in European countries has actually increased in the last 250 years. And a lot of this has to do not with sexual selection or anything, but in reality from better nutrition. And so that actually allows the individual to grow to their full genetic potential when there is access to nutrients. Exercise is not inherited, but does have an impact on phenotype. Or the sun. When you're in the sun, you actually increase gene expression for the pigment melanin, making your skin darker. Practice for test review also changes your phenotype by learning more intelligent. And we can see the effects of nutrition on phenotype on studies with identical twins. We can see how diet affects them. This one's really cool. This one's with a rabbit that actually turns on gene expression in cold parts of its body. So that way it is, if you think about it, the darker fur turn on gene expression to make the dark pigment that would make those areas appear darker, that would absorb more sunlight, warming up those areas. The rabbit is an endotherm or warm-blooded organism that needs to thermoregulate. So by using the sunlight, that means there's less energy required on the animal's part. You can see the cute little experiment where they strapped an ice pack to the rabbit's back, and then it, for a course of a time period, and that turned on gene expression for dark fur in that cold area. You can also see nutrient levels. So here, when we talk about these plants, if you use identical DNA plants, like clones of plants, and you plant them with different nutrients, you can see how the nutrients have an impact on height of the plant. Now, in real life, it might be hard to get clones of a plant, but you could always get a cutting. So my brother has a geranium plant in his front yard. I could cut off a branch. That's called a cutting, and I could plant it. I could take a couple branches, and I could plant them in different qualities of soil and measure and record how they grow. That would be a good experimental design because the genetics is controlled for. All the cuttings would have the exact same DNA. I would just be changing their environment. And then I'd be able to tell if their phenotype was environmental or genetic. I'm going to skip that for now. Then we have phototropism, plants growing in response to light. They actually do this with hormones called auxin. We have gravitropism. The plants will actually make really dense granules of starch that they can... it'll sink to the bottom of the cell. They can sense gravity. This one is really cool. Reptiles, not all reptiles, but some species actually determine their sex, whether they're male or female, depending on temperature. So when we read this graph, here's 100% of the offspring are males. This would be 0% are males. So 100% female. And right here you can see the green turtle at 26 degrees Celsius, 100% of the offspring are male. At 31 degrees Celsius, 100% of the offspring are female. So right about 29 degrees Celsius, you get a 50-50 ratio. So here it's not X and Y chromosomes, but rather temperature that determines the sex of the offspring. And that's kind of cool because if you ever dug in sand, as you dig deeper, it gets colder. So in this example here, these eggs at the bottom would be males, and these ones near the top would be female. Here, actually this, you might be like, Misty Mar. Right here you can see, this alligator. Let me erase the ink on the slide. But if you look at the alligator, you can see that actually in cold temperatures and hot temperatures, they're female, and in the middle, they're male. So different variations in how these different reptiles do this. There's a rabbit again. Oh, this is kind of a cool example of behaviors, tying in how certain behaviors can be selected for and tied to evolution. So when we talk about pretty much any behaviors, whether it's communication or, communication, it's going to be based in evolution, basically. So these behaviors, like to do a dance to attract a female, would be selected for or against. Or like the waggle dance in bees was obviously selected for. So here you have an example of inclusive fitness, or we call this kin selection. And in kin means like relatives, like the next of kin. And so here there's behaviors, like here we have some prairie dogs that yell a warning when a predator is nearby. So if a prairie dog lives, we learned today after school that it's called a coterie is like a group of prairie dogs or something. Anyway, if there's like a prairie dog that lives with its children and its nieces and its nephews, sisters, its family group, when a predator is nearby, it yells a warning, which then lowers this individual's fitness because the predator can see it, but yet all of its family members have a better chance at survival. So we call this altruism or kin selection because it reduces the animal's individual fitness, but increases the fitness of others in the population. And when you think, well, why, man? Well, think if this prairie dog has children, each of those children carry 50% of her DNA. And if she has nieces and nephews, those are each carrying 25% of her DNA. So by alerting her family group, she's actually helping her genes to go on to the next generation. We also have hibernation and estivation. So in hibernation, you would have this in winter months and cold temperatures. The animals survive a change in the environment by hibernating and slowing down their metabolism, versus these like reptile things. In hot summer months in the desert ecosystems, you would have estivation. It's basically hibernation, but in heat and summer. Hydrangeas are cool plants that if I wanted to grow a whole bunch of blue hydrangeas, I would not be able to cut or reproduce 2 blue hydrangeas and get blue hydrangeas because their flower color is dependent on the pH of their soil. So it doesn't really matter what gametes I put together. It depends on whether the pH of the soil is acidic or not. So that's another example of environment's effect on phenotype. Here you can see the gene expression on rabbits in the Arctic. So here you have a camouflage like in snow, and then in plants in like springtime or summertime. So it goes through a period of changes in gene expression, turning on and turning off its genes in response to light, so its fur color can match the environment. Now the animal doesn't choose this. This gene expression is selected for. Obviously, if a rabbit did not change its gene expression, then it would have low fitness. So by able to change its gene expression, it's actually selected for. So animal behavior, just a quick review. It's the study of the evolutionary basis. We have fixed action patterns that are innate in species. They don't really have a choice. Once they respond to a stimulus, they follow through with that behavior. Like the egg rolling in geese, we have imprinting. We also have migration. Now, migration is innate, fixed long-distance travel, usually for resources, whether it's food or for mates. And the animals migrate using the stars, the sun, possibly the magnetic field. We also have circadian rhythms, which are predictable, like cycles of sleep and wakefulness. It's our biological clock, and it the amount of like sunlight coming in gives us clues about when to turn on and turn off genes that deal with us being awake or asleep. Even if you get rid of the environmental cues of light and dark, we actually maintain an internal circadian rhythm of 24.2 hours. Okay, so that really comes down to periodic gene expression. And then we have, let's go into communication. We have different types of animal communication. We have visual, chemical, tactile, and auditory. So the visual, that could be like the waggle dance in the bees, where their longer distance tells them how far away the food is, and the angle tells them the direction to fly when they leave the nest or the hive. We also have chemical, which would be your pheromones, tactile is touch, and auditory is going to be sound. You can think of auditory with that blue whale, who is the loneliest whale in the world because her Auditory signals are low fitness because no one else can hear them. Visual would be like the dancing birds or the bees. Chemicals would be pheromones, and tactile would be touch. And I think that's a pretty basic, generalized view, overview of environmental response and animal behaviors. I would also highly recommend watching the 3 Bozeman videos I posted in your homework document. Okay, good job, guys.